Kia ora koutou and greetings from New Zealand. Lovely to have you all with us. Today we have an extraordinary human being with us. Newton, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Leanne, thank you for having me. Very happy to be here.
Fabulous. So let me just introduce our guest to you all. Newton Cheng is, in a very particular order, is a husband and father, a partner of 15 years and father of two daughters aged 6 and 2. And he is also he happens to work for Google as the Director of Health and Performance. And I got the order mixed up because actually the thing before his work that's really important, this order, is that he's a husband, father, he's an athlete, and then he happens to work for Google, right? So let me just say something about Newton's athleticism. So Newton is a weightlifter, and not just any kind of weightlifter. Last year, Newton won the US National Open champion title in weightlifting. And that's something because, believe it or not, Newton is actually in the master's class, which is age 40 and over. But the open class is for anyone in an age group in your weight class. Have I got that right, Newton?
That is correct. So I'm 45 years old. My next oldest competitor was 23.
Extraordinary. but as well as that, of course, Newton has had multiple time winning of the National Masters champion and has also been the world champion Masters weightlifter. Is that a current title, Newton?
It is not. I haven't been able to make the world championship for a while due to childcare.
Got it.
So
got it. Well, hence comes
no
the
one gets
order
paid to
of
do
priority.
Sport. Yes,
for sure. Got it. Wonderful. Well, Newton has kindly agreed to join us today as part of our series of exploring with leaders from around the world this idea of humanizing work, which came out of the book Human Work: 5 Leadership Mindsets for Humanizing Workplaces. And so I loved the idea of being able to have a conversation with Newton today, who brings a perspective from a large organization, although everything he says is just his personal perspective here. But I find it fascinating as we think about how we humanize workplaces in very large organizations through to very small organizations. And Newton's has some experience in that, obviously in the form of very large organizations, but has some really interesting perspectives of his own that I hope that we'll be able to explore in our conversation today. So Newton, I just wanted to put this question to you as we kick off our conversation. How would you describe the ideal workplace in 2024 for humans?
I think as a starting point, one of the things I like to say is to remember that each person, we're not human capital. We are not our title or our role on the org chart. Everyone is just a human in a certain context. And so if you go back to my intro, the way I order it, it's very, very specific. It is family man, then athlete, then leader in the workplace. The reason I do that is because I want to put front and center what are the most important roles and identities that I play in my life so that I keep clear, not just to my employer, but to me, that these are the priorities and these are the ways that I'm going to order it. Because if you enter a high-performing organization, you've likely hired people who many have sacrificed other parts of their life for work. So I order it specifically like that to keep work from clawing its way up the ladder and taking over more than it should. So I think that's the first thing, is having this ethos of we are all just humans in a certain context. And so if you start with the human at the center and then say, and around them are the other people of the organization, the systems of the organization, and the grander vision of the organization, then we have something that's really rooted with humans, not about the money-making operating system of the organization.
Got it. And so it feels like, I don't know, that there are folk in our organizations who experience power and self-determination, and many folk in organizations who in fact don't feel this level of ability to really first and foremost position themselves as humans before workers. And so I'm curious about if we think about what the best work environment looks and feels like for human beings today, what is that like? What are the kind of conditions that we might want to create as leaders in our organizations to enable everyone to be able to have that humanized experience?
So I'll divide it into two categories. One is, the more sexy bucket right now of courageous and vulnerable leadership. And I'm going to put that aside for now. The other side of it, which I feel like we don't talk about as much, but because of the speed and complexity of the world we're in, I think we actually just need to get better at basics of business. So oftentimes, if I look at the way that we are leading and managing, if I go into an organization and say, okay, are we doing really good strategic planning and prioritization? I can find a lot of cracks in the system. And so I know we all like to look at what's the latest and greatest Harvard Business Review article, but are you, one, taking on a reasonable number of projects? Two, as the leader, using your political capital to protect your team and say, we can't do more than that. Or if you ask more than that, I'm either going to burn out my people or you're going to need more resources. And then three, once you've committed to that, are you actually being very, very, very planful so that people know what needs to be done by when, how their success will be measured, so that people know what they got to do to be successful. And so if they have that level of clarity and they have a job they can actually get their arms around, that is table stakes. No one wants to talk about that in this day and age because it doesn't make the
You're
headlines.
absolutely right. Yeah. I love what you say about, the other bucket, which is the more sexy bucket. And you're right. And so what I think I'm hearing you say, Newton, is that if we can just focus on getting the business strategy and the related resourcing and clarity over roles and sufficient resourcing for the roles, then that's a kind of fundamental in terms of creating a more human workplace. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the
Okay.
basics.
It's the basics. And I'm certainly noticing as I talk to leaders in my work that this idea of doing more with less seems to be a very common kind of line. What's your sense of, advice that you might have to people when they're given this? Perhaps the basics aren't being paid attention to in the way that they should be. And so there is this drive to really do more with less at the risk of burning their people out, etc.
So the counter mantra that I use to do more with less is do less, do it better. And just because I say that, it doesn't change things overnight. People are already wired to say, but if I do more with less, I get rewarded, I get advancement.
Uh-huh.
Um, at this point in the middle of a mental health epidemic where people are being burned out, one, I think you have to keep reminding people that is unsustainable. If you burn out, that's not going to be great for your career either. So that's step one. Step two is you as the leader, and I struggle to do this too, you will have to make some hard calls to say, I know we want to do more because it's going to look great on everyone's performance review. We have to be realistic about resourcing and shrink what we commit to now, do less, do it better. But the hypothesis, and I very much believe this is true, is that by keeping people in the sustainable range, as well as enabling them to focus on a smaller set of things, they'll actually perform at a higher quality and faster. So I believe over time, you'll actually make more progress on average.
Mm, mm, mm. Yes. Gosh, I want to go down that pathway some more, Newton. And I'm really tempted by this idea of want to talk to you about something that's somewhat controversial. It's happening across the world at the moment, and that's layoffs. I'm really curious about the intersection between AI and humanizing the workplace. And I know that's not the only driver for a whole heap of layoffs right now, but it is one. And so it's not going away, right? Like the shape of our workforce will be changing so continuously and dramatically, is my sense, in the next few years. So we want to get used to this idea of big workforce changes, including layoffs. So can you tell us a bit about what your thinking is, Newton, if we're creating humanized workplaces, how do we manage this idea of this changing workforce, particularly layoffs?
So I think there's a few things. So if let's put AI aside, because I think there's layoffs and
Mm-hmm.
there's AI, and both of those are
Uh-huh.
very long conversations. So if I first look at the layoffs, and I just want to make clear, I speak for myself on this topic. I do not speak for Google.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I see happening is with the layoffs, you're now having this divide in companies where you have those who are in fear of the layoffs, those of us, the rank and file, like many of us, pointing fingers up the chain to the leaders of the organizations. So now you have this kind of like breakdown of trust. And I
Mm.
get it. I get it. We had like one social contract maybe in the last few years when things were better, and it feels like so many companies have gone back on that and are saying like, you know what, we said we'd care for you in this way. We can't do that moving forward. What I don't see, this is a very unpopular opinion. What I see is people really trying to empathize with those in fear of the layoffs, and
Mm-hmm.
it is a very hard thing, and we definitely need to do that. What I see people not doing is empathizing with those in power. So we talk about
Mm-hmm.
humanizing the workplace, like you have to humanize it for everyone, even the one who has to make the decision to do the layoffs.
Mm.
And instead, what I've seen is we're painting them as villains. And maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But I think we need to have first a more thoughtful conversation about how did we arrive here? And if we assume good intent, especially now because it is hardest to do so with so much fear in the system, why might we have arrived at this? How might a smart, well intended person have made this decision, no matter how traumatic to so many people? And how are we going to rebuild trust top to bottom in an organization knowing all of those things? No one wants to have that conversation right now, or very few do, because there's a lot of hurt and fear in the system.
Mm.
And so I know many are not ready to have that conversation, but it needs to happen at some point.
Mm-mm-mm. Yeah, I'm really seeing the relationship in what you're saying, Newton, between getting the basics right as well, like the whole strategy, resourcing, etc., and the workforce planning that comes with that, right? Because now we're in that situation. So is it possible that if we get better at the basics in terms of that stuff, that actually the impact of some of those basics, like layoffs, we can potentially either do better or it break down trust less, or us be able to have the same level of empathy and compassion for our fellow human beings, regardless of whether they're the decision maker or the person impacted by the decision?
I think there's accountability at multiple levels. So
Mm-hmm.
you have those who are, let's say, individual contributors in an organization. Their job is to do their job very, very well, and you meet the requirements of their projects, their stakeholders, etc. For the middle managers, they're the ones who are often responsible for those basics of, regardless of all the pressures from above, they still have to prioritize for their team. They have to plan accordingly. They have to set expectations both up, down, and across the organization. For those who are in power, and especially for hyper growth industries, there's a lot of, say, leaders who, especially if they've had to do layoffs, are now, raising their hand saying, I take responsibility for us growing too quickly, say during the pandemic when things were going well. And there is this question about what does it mean to take accountability for that? because it doesn't look like anything punitively has happened to these leaders. And that's too big a question for me to comment on, nor do I really care to in a public forum. But I'd say it's a very, very good question. So I think up and down the chain, there's shared responsibility for the success of the organization. But I don't know what accountability looks like for all of those groups.
Yeah, got it. But at least we want to be asking that question. What does it look like?
Yes.
Yeah. And how is it different? Yeah, I really appreciate that. So we've been delving into the I don't know, the unsexy side of human workplaces, by me bringing in layoffs and us talking about getting the basics right. I'd love, Newton, for us to explore a little bit about why is this important to you? Why are we even talking about humanizing workplaces? Why is it important?
So 2 reasons. I came into this role at Google because I was always passionate. Specifically, I came in via the topic of health and well-being. So I run these programs at Google, the health and performance programs, where they're really intended there to help people take better care of themselves and each other. Now, that's also my career mission, is to enable people to better take care of themselves and each other, whether that's at Google or beyond. More recently, I ended up in my own struggles with mental health. I went on mental health leave despite all the expertise I have in this field. And so coming back, I had the expertise. I had a lot of data from inside and outside of organizations like Google. I knew how many were struggling. And so I said, the right thing for me to do is to share my story, because so many of us are hiding our struggles due to stigma. And we can't address a problem unless we talk about it. So right now, so many leaders are being asked to show up with more courage and vulnerability.
Yeah.
And we're kind of tiptoeing up to this line of stigma to say, okay, I'll try to do better. I'll share a little bit more. I'll do all the tips and tricks. I am a little frustrated with the speed at which that progress is happening, knowing how many are suffering. So for myself, what I've decided is the way I like to describe it is I play make believe that the stigma doesn't exist. And I go to work and I say the things that I think need to be said about mental health, my own or the topic more broadly. And I pretend that there's nothing at stake. My hypothesis is that the stigma is so oppressive that I won't actually get to a place where net it negatively impacts my career. So what I've seen happen is around me, the conversation around mental health and people's openness to talk about it has accelerated dramatically. I also, a few, maybe people removed from me hear whispers about what the heck is Newton doing? And the way I have reframed this in my head is, if I'm trying to put the organization and those around me into enough of a state of discomfort that change might happen, what I should see is applause from those who are already on board, and quiet whispers, or maybe even some arrows shot my way from those who are not. If I don't see the arrows, then I'm like, I haven't found the line yet.
Amazing. So Newton, it sounds like you're just trying to kind of push in a particular direction, partly because of the frustration of it's not moving fast enough. And so you've got your own story and your ability to be able to anchor the idea of mental well-being from your own story. And so you're just using it as if this is what we do in the workplace now.
Yes. Maybe a more concrete way to explain it is, a lot of us have read Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead. It is such a fantastic book. I went back and reviewed it, and I thought, it's all here. All the stuff we need to do is here, but we're not doing it. And so basically it's kind of like, okay, well, I'll just take Brene Brown's book and I'll just do it all, regardless of the fear of stigma. And let's see what happens. And as I do it, I'm just going to tell stories back to the system to say, I'm still here. I didn't die. And here's what I learned.
Yeah. And so Newton, it sounds to me like you're an example of someone being able to influence the system from within, not at the top of the chain, but actually taking some responsibility for how things shift around you in terms of what you model.
Yes. My hope is I have enough power to affect change, but I hope
Mm-hmm.
I don't have so much power that my example is unrelatable.
Yeah, got it. Got it. Well, I mean, that's my next question. So we're really opening up the box here to say, well, if you really want to have a human workplace, it's so easy to look up the chain, right? And say, well, hang on, what's the leader doing? And then there's this other question, which is, and what am I doing? And how is it that I'm humanizing the workplace around me? And I think you were just giving us an example of how that can be done, right?
Yes. I think we all have to decide, how do I want to show up in this fight or not? And I
Mm,
can't make that decision for you. I've
hmm
decided this is at the top of my list.
Got it. So I might just finish our conversation, Newton, with this question about, okay, so if we can all show up and take some responsibility for that and our contribution towards a more human workplace, what is the one or two things that a leader in an organization who actually does get to control the levers, that's made up in the world of complexity, but let's just say that. What is the one or two things that a leader who has, you know, obvious power in the system, what should they pay attention to create the conditions for others to have a more human workplace?
What's coming up for me right now, I think, is one, what were the expectations of the employee coming into the organization? So I work in tech at one of the fastest moving companies, fastest moving large companies. And the way I often frame this to people is, yes, we want to take care of ourselves. We want to take care of each other. You've also entered a $1 trillion company that is growing 20% year over year. Let's just think about what might the realities of that workplace experience be in terms of the speed at which it has to move and what it's like to be in a machine that large and complex moving at that speed. It's going to be crazy. And I'm not just talking about Google. I could be talking about Meta, Netflix, Amazon,
Yeah.
Apple, and it's all the same story from all my friends who work in those companies. So I think there has to be an expectation there of, like, I understand that on the recruiting side, so many of these companies have done a fabulous job of making it appear that everything will be sunshine and rainbows. And it is a very nice work environment with amazing people. And the ambitions are just crazy high. So I think that's step one, is like, you are stepping into a roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
And I don't know if everyone is on the same page about that. So
hmm
that's one. What
hmm
are you coming into? And then two, I would say, at that speed and complexity, things will break down, things will get messy. How are you going to maintain forums for high trust conversations, not just within a level, because that's easy, but up and down the chain? And that can be so hard, especially when so many things that will come up, they can't be solved. I think Google actually does a fairly good job of this for the size they are, even if so many people are, you know, not necessarily satisfied with it all the time. But I see the effort and I see the forums made available. And I think it is a quantum leap more than many organizations.
And so, just to clarify, this idea of creating forums for high trust conversations, what's a practical thing that a leader might be able to do to enable that in their organization?
I think a practical thing, it's not a moment in time. I think you have to start, and then you build trust one answer at a time. So every time you answer a question, someone will be watching to say, hey, did you answer that with candor, with respect? And then what happened afterwards? Was action taken? Was, if you decided, no, that's not something we want to do, did you close the loop? And so I think about how we do that with my team within Google, and I still
Mm,
get it wrong.
mm,
I'm several orders of magnitude smaller than the entire company. It's hard, but you can never close that door, and you can never show up in a way that degrades that trust, because you can kill all the trust you've built with one, one question where you lash out, or one question where you just shut it down.
mm, mm. So I was hearing there, Newton, candor, alignment of words and actions, and consistency.
Yes,
Yeah,
especially the consistency.
yeah. I think sometimes we think of trust as something we can just go to the shop and buy or something. We'll just get some more of that. It's just not like that, is it? It's this ongoing, everyday commitment to creating those conditions, and there's no quick fix, easy way.
Yeah, one of the things that, if you look on my LinkedIn posts, I'll often say the phrase "do the reps," and that's a reference to my powerlifting journey, where people will ask, "Well, how did you go from?" I started relatively late in my early 30s, when many they start maybe in their early teens. How did you go from that to world champion? And I tell them, well, because I went in the garage several times a week and I just did the reps. And each time I did them, I tried to get better and better and better. And I didn't miss a session. And I just kept it up for over a decade. That's it. There was no magic. And that was just one athlete pursuing one championship. If we're talking about a CEO trying to build trust across an organization, it is the exact same process, but you have to be consistent.
I'm going to take that away with me, Newton. Do the reps.
Do the reps.
Newton, thank you so much for your time. For our listeners out there, Newton is a fairly prolific poster on LinkedIn. Highly suggest that you reach out to him and get some weekly doses of inspiration to keep doing the reps. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today, Newton, and wishing you all the very best. And let me get the order right: husband and father, athlete, and somebody who happens to work at Google.
You nailed it. Thank you, Leanne.
Go well, Newton.